According to the United Nations, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. Universities are the primary institutions for the dissemination of knowledge through teaching and for the generation of new knowledge through research. These aspects make universities essential players in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited and honored to welcome you to the very first World Higher Education Ranking Summit that brings together world's leading minds in higher education, policymakers, change makers, innovators, and extraordinary human beings. I'm really privileged to moderate today's discussion. And today, we are going to talk about the responsibilities of universities in implementation of the United Nations 17 Global Goals. And it's a very exciting topic for everyone who is watching us today, because the SDG agenda that has been adopted in 2015 by the United Nations and is basically the program for not leaving anyone behind and the program for the development by 2030 for sustainable development of the world. And let me use this opportunity to say a huge thank you to everyone on this panel, because today we are joined by leaders in their field, people that create great changes in their communities, in their countries, and across the world. Let me introduce you to Colette Mathucelli, professor at New York University. She is an extraordinary academic who is actually global leader and chair of New York University European Horizons Advisory Board, member of the advisory board of the Data Union, an American academic and author. She is on graduate faculty at New York University, where Professor Colette is responsible for international relations, and she is a scholar in international relations. It is extremely a great honor for us to have you on board, Professor Colette, with your more than 20 years of excellence in demonstrating service to society in your chosen profession. And I know that Professor Colette has already started the incredible initiative that is called Lead Impact, and it's really fascinating what you're doing for the society. Thank you very much. Where are you joining us from?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor to join you today, Angelica. I am in Monroe Township, New Jersey, which is about 25 minutes from Princeton and about an hour outside of New York City.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I am really pleased to introduce you to Brighton Coma, who is also an extraordinary leader. He's a social entrepreneur, climate innovator. In 2015, he was awarded the Queen's Young Leaders Award by Queen Elizabeth II at the Buckingham Palace for his exemplary leadership. And his work in sustainability has been recognized by President Barack Obama, Prince Harry, and many other world leaders. What is more, in 2016, Brighton has become the first African to win the Global WWF International President's Award. He was named among the outstanding young persons of the world by the Emperor of Japan and Junior Chamber International. Brighton is a Mandela Washington Fellow, Global Youth Ambassadors of the Children's Radio Foundation of South Africa, and also he is a graduate from master's graduate from Columbia University. And what is more, Brighton is a global director at SDSN Youth. I'm really honored to have you on board, Brighton. Thank you very much for joining us today. And where are you joining us from?
Thank you so much, Angelica, and thank you to everybody joining us from around the world. I'm joining you from New York City, and I'm sitting right in my apartment. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to welcome Professor Dr. Yusuf Baran, who is a professor in molecular biology and genetics. And Dr. Baran has been serving as the president of the Izmir Institute of Technology and chairman of the board of directors of the Izmir Technology Development Zone since October 28, 2018. After completing his bachelor's degree in biology at Dickle University from 1994 to 1998, He earned his PhD degrees from Middle East Technical University. And during his PhD studies, he worked at the Medical University of South Carolina, and he has been working at the Izmir Institute of Technology since 2007. Dr. Yusuf Baran has been involved in more than 40 scientific projects supported by national and international organizations, and he has more than 350 published scientific articles. It's a great honor and pleasure to have you on board, Professor Yusuf. And where are you joining us from?
Thank you, Angelica, for this very nice and kind introduction. And I'm really, very pleased and honored to be here and join this panel. So thank you so much for your very kind invitation. Well, I'm joining you from Turkey, Izmir. Izmir is known as the beautiful city of Turkey, and it's on the western side of Turkey. And you know, Turkey is an Asian and European and Middle East, so we are located in like a bridge between the continents and the cultures as well. Thank you for your kind introduction and invitation.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And it's extraordinary because we have our professors, academics, leaders joining us from all over the world. Now I would like to introduce you to Her Excellency, Dr. April Tropiano. Dr. April is an international expert on business and leadership. She is the CEO of AT International. Dr. April and her team teach business owners how to be the CEO of their own business so they can play more, spend more, and become better leaders. As creator of Solopreneur to CEO and founder of L5 Institute for Leadership, Dr. April helps clients develop skills, systems, and processes, giving them a blueprint to build a business that allows them to enjoy life to the fullest. And Dr. April is actually a member of Women in Insurance and Financial Services, General Agents and Managers Associations, Women Speakers Associations. What is more, Dr. April is bringing cutting-edge strategies to her clients. She was nominated for the Small Business Innovator of the Year by USA Today, and she is a firm believer in lifting others as she climbs. She was nominated for Woman of the Year by Women, WIFS. Thank you so much, Dr. April, and it's an honor to have you on board. Where are you joining us from?
Hello, hello. I am in St. Louis, Missouri, USA right now today. Yes, it's a gorgeous day here. Welcome. Thank you for having me on board.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. April. I would like to introduce Dr. Lisa Coleman. She's an inaugural Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation. She's a thought leader, board advisor, highly experienced senior professional with a demonstrated history of working across sectors, including higher education, government, tech, and corporate industries. Areas of her focus are innovation, technology, strategic organizational assessment, research, fundraiser, and program development. It's a great pleasure to have you on board, Dr. Lisa. And where are you joining us from today?
Well, I'm normally in New York City because I'm at NYU, but today I'm in California. I'm in San Diego, and it's beautiful here.
This is just brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for the audience that has just joined us, we are WES Conference, the world's first higher education ranking summit. And today we're going to discuss the role of higher institutions in implementing the UN 17 global goals. And I would like to give the floor to a person that is actually responsible for implementation of global goals agenda, the global director of the SDSN Youth, Brighton Coma. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelica. Thank you for the very warm introduction. I think it gives me so much pleasure and delight to be joined by all of you today. Incredible scholars, incredible thinkers, and incredible contributors to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I think today is a very beautiful day, number one, because we have about 7 years, 8 years to the day and year when we need to reflect back and see where we are with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We can now begin to take stock of how much we've achieved in implementing the global goals. Countries are progressing, but at the same time, we've observed that the COVID-19 pandemic has reversed many years of progress that we've made in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. But I think what's even more critical right now is the level of access to quality education. We are seeing that so many young people, especially in developing countries, don't have the luxury of being able to attend classes because of the disruption that has happened as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's gatherings like this that remind us of the importance of ensuring that we create sound policies, we create sound opportunities for education to be recognized as a fundamental human right for everybody, irrespective of where you are, irrespective of how you look, irrespective of the country you're from. And over the years, we've observed that young people continue being left behind. And the question that really demands an answer is, if the Sustainable Development Goals require that nobody should be left behind, we should be asking ourselves, who are the ones behind? And how can we go back to these individuals who are behind to be able to give them the opportunities they deserve to be able to have access to quality education? But the most important aspect is how intertwined the global goals are. For example, quality inclusive education can break the vicious cycle of poverty, working towards goal number 1 in this case. Another example is goal number 5 on gender equality. Since quality inclusive education helps to achieve gender equality and empower girls, it's important to see the linkages that all these goals continue to have. And it's for this reason that investing in education, especially girls' education, will not only transform their lives, but it will help build the resilient societies and sustainable economies we all wish to achieve. And it's for this reason that I want to emphasize one critical element: quality inclusive education. And quality inclusive education doesn't only foster self-esteem for young people, skills development, entrepreneurship, and innovation. It also promotes the full and productive empowerment opportunities for everybody. And it's conferences like the World Higher Education Ranking Conference that give us the opportunity to be able to engage in productive dialogue and exchange ideas and thoughts and best practices around how we can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Without education, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals becomes even harder. When we go back to 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, and in 2002, when we had the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development Goals, it was emphasized that the education system we need to provide in this decade should ensure that it provides the knowledge, the skills, the values, and the attitudes that empower the next generation to contribute to sustainable development. And that was the beginning of Education for Sustainable Development, which now is giving us a blueprint and a foundation to be able to have conversations like what we are having today. The last thing I want to emphasize is cross-sector collaboration and working together. Because when you look at global goal number 17, which looks at partnerships for the global goals, it requires different disciplines coming together, from educators to innovators, engineers, developers, coming together to be able to devise solutions that foster sustainable development. And it gives me excitement today that the World Higher Education Ranking Summit is bringing a multi-sectoral, interdisciplinary coterie of leaders from Zambia to the United States, to the Middle East, to Europe, everybody bringing their unique experiences to advance sustainable development goals. And at STSN Youth, our mandate is to localize these goals. That's why higher education plays a critical role, because that's where young people and even older people are given new tools, new thinking. They are given the right skills to be able to contribute to a just and inclusive society. And I wish to congratulate everybody, including the organizers that have worked tirelessly to put this event together. It would not have been possible without your relentless effort, your tirelessness, and your renewed enthusiasm, irrespective of the challenges that you might have encountered. I also want to thank all the distinguished speakers that have dedicated their time and energy to be with us today, but also the participants from around the world that have decided to be with us today and in the next coming days. I wish you nothing but the very best. But if you have to remember anything from what I've talked about, it's the fact that sustainable development cannot happen without your involvement. And it doesn't matter the discipline you're in, because our mission is not to leave anybody behind. And we look forward to creating partnerships and collaboration with everyone. I thank you, and I look forward to meeting all of you and engaging with you. Please tweet, share on social media, and promote all the key messages that you're gathering from this summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brighton, for shedding the light on today's agenda and on all your initiatives that you've been doing to actually promote sustainable agenda across the world, especially working with the youth. And I know how much UNSDSN Youth has done to teach, educate young people all over the world, even in crisis regions, to work together collaboratively on shaping a better and more sustainable world for everyone, not leaving anyone behind. And I really hope that by 2030, all of these goals will be achieved by every country, every nation. Today, we live in a very difficult time, turbulent time, and it's very difficult to address such challenges. However, I know that everyone on this panel is doing everything in their capacity and capability to bridge the gap, to build the society that is focused on sustainable development and on peace. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to introduce everyone, and I give the floor to Dr. Khaled, who will take the discussion further and will be able to moderate and navigate this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Angelica. You, Linda, Majdi, Haitham, the entire team for WARES 2022. We are so grateful to have this opportunity to be in dialogue together, to have these conversations, which, as Brighton has underlined, are so critical in our world today. And Brighton, it's inspiring to listen to you, and words matter. And the words you are sharing with us as educators, as thought leaders, as innovators are so critical as we think about how to promote human security, the dignity of the person. I remember many, many years ago, the United Nations Academic Impact, when Ramu was there, invited a number of us educators, some of us from NYU, others from different universities in the local area. And we had the good fortune to be together and to talk already about the ways in which our universities could come together, could promote these types of conversations. And 2 decades later, we have made so much progress. On that note, it was my pleasure to write a keynote essay for the UN Chronicle many, many years ago, in which I underlined education and the freedom from exclusion. And on that note, I'd like to ask the first question to Dr. Lisa Coleman, because you are so involved in both global inclusion and strategic innovation at New York University, which of course has a global reach. And I'd like to hear from you, Dr. Coleman, in your view, how is the local and the global coming together in some of the initiatives that NYU is taking to make education more and more available to those perhaps who are not so included in the types of educational initiatives that are so critical in our world today? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And thank you, Brighton, for your Extraordinary comments, really setting us off in the right direction. And so as we think about this relationship between the global and the local, I think this is crucial. So thanks for highlighting this question. I think it's a great way to begin, because far too often when we're thinking about our goals, especially if we're thinking about it from where we sit, we can then think about that global, and particularly as we think about somewhere like NYU that has campuses in Abu Dhabi and Shanghai and Paris and Sydney, et cetera. And so we have a lot of different work going on globally. But what does that mean in terms of the local regions? And then more importantly, what does that mean in terms of the relationship between these countries and of course, our sort of business in them? And so the first thing I like to say is we have to think about reciprocity. As we develop these partnerships across the globe, we have to think about reciprocity, and what that means is, how are we working in the local areas? How are we developing the local areas? What does that look like, and how do we concretize that? So I'm going to use Abu Dhabi as one example, and this goes back to something that Brighton was talking about earlier. We know across the globe that there are challenges, and when we think about even in terms of gender equality, right, and that's what obviously one of the sustainable goals. What we also know is in about 6 Middle Eastern countries, women are outperforming men in STEM. It breaks the stereotypes. And so some of us that sit in Western countries, we don't know this. And so what did we do? But what we know, and for instance, we have a campus in Abu Dhabi, what we know is that not necessarily are those women employed at the rates, right, that they might be employed. So this is this issue of exclusion that you bring up, particularly in terms of the labor markets. And in the local area, what did we do? We hired women. We hired women architects. We hired women mathematicians to work on our campus and with our campus in NYU AD as one example of right closing that gap, really digging into the local spaces, and then of course thinking about this attention to the goals, right, the larger goals of institutional goals and educational goals. So bringing together education and labor in this moment. And then thinking about how do we advance, right, women's careers. So when I think about the local, again, it's really thinking about that reciprocity. How are we building capacity in the local spaces? And what does that mean in terms of the relationship development? The last thing that I will say around this idea, particularly of global education, is also to think about local and what that means in terms of curriculum development. And I want to say this because this is very important. We can't just import one curriculum to another country and expect that to work. So to go back to Brighton's points about partnership, if we're going to have partnership, and again, this is about, has to do with reciprocity, is then we have to think about how are we building that educational curriculum and through a process of co-creation. And that co-creation is transgenerational, intergenerational, with our students, our faculty, our staff, et cetera. It can't be just done in a vacuum in a silo. And I think far too often when we create the sort of curricular components, we do it from one vantage point versus another, and we don't involve, right, a number of people. So particularly students, I think, and this is really important as we think about emerging technologies, emerging industries, the future of work, et cetera. So again, as we're thinking about this local development, I think it's really important that we think about this. And again, I'll concretize this with one example. We've been doing some work in Eritrea where kids are taking used computer parts and then building, right, recycled parts and building new kinds of computers. We're working with those young people to bring them into, right, a curriculum that helps them teach us, all right, you're building from parts. That's not what we usually do. So let's think about how we can develop a curriculum around this so we can engage a different kind of youth in a different region that actually doesn't have access to the kinds of resources that we might have access to in some of the places, even like St. Louis, Missouri, where my colleague is. So really thinking about that. So again, local reciprocity, partnership relationship, what does that look like in terms of those growth models, but importantly, and then how does that relate to, as Brighton was talking about, these sustainable goals?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. First, for emphasizing reciprocity, for giving us concrete examples of how NYU, as a global network, to use former President John Sexton's term, the Global Network University, of course, in his book, Standing for Reason, the University in a Dogmatic Age, we must think always ahead, forward-looking, sempre avanti, always forward, in terms of how we work with these tools. And I think underlining these tools is critical, Dr. Coleman, and I'm so pleased to hear you speak of this, because we have so much to do in terms of innovation. And indeed, our purpose is to innovate and to serve as we innovate. So on that note and on that thought, I'd like to turn to Dr. Yusuf. And you mentioned, Dr. Coleman, STEM and bringing in those with the STEM skills that we might not realize are present, but are present, and emphasizing the building of curriculum in local areas. Dr. Yusuf, perhaps you could pick up and give us a sense of how in your area you are working with young people and you are working intergenerationally to share best practices and to make us more aware of the ways in which we can learn from you. Please.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. And I would like to start with my special thanks to Brighton and Lisa for their sharing insights with us. So regarding with the generation of with the production of the future leaders, I mean the education of the young people, of course, this is the most important responsibility of the universities and actually for all the education institutions, whether primary, secondary, high schools or the universities, because this is the magic behind the establishment of the universities. So transfer of the knowledge and know-how from the older generations to the younger generations, and of course then increase the information and the knowledge that we already accumulated for hundreds of the years. So we need to pass our knowledge and experience to the younger generations for sure. And when we develop the future leaders, of course, it should not only be the academic development of the students, but there are non-academic developments, and on the other hand, there are some other capacities that we love our students to have as well. And in order to provide this, we are trying our best to create an ecosystem for our students to develop academically and non-academically as well. And over here, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are the important target for us, because in order to achieve for any country or for any society, in order to achieve UN Sustainable Development Goals, for sure, you will need human capacity, you will need human resources. And without the human resources, you can't do anything and you can't achieve anything actually. And when you look at these sustainable development goals, it starts from no poverty, zero hunger, climate change, life under the water, renewable energy, etc. And all of these can be achieved with the well-educated people and of course with the scientific approach as well. So there is no, actually, I don't believe that there is no global without the local or local without the global, because local is part of the global and global is composed of the locals. I mean, all the locals come together to form the global. So they feed each other. So on the other hand, I don't believe in that no country or no university or no discipline can solve any of these sustainable development goals by itself. I mean, how come any country can solve the climate change or poverty or education or life under the water or renewable energy? In order to provide sustainability of the world, sustainability of the life and the quality of life as well, all the countries should work together in order to provide the best side of the climate change. All the countries should contribute. And when you think about the global challenge as well, no challenge can be solved by one single discipline, I mean the scientific discipline. So if you think about the cancer, if you think about the renewable energy, if you think about the recycling or whatever, all the disciplines should contribute in order to have a solution. And as I said, global issues or challenges are composed of the local ones, and the local ones can turn into a global challenge. Right now, you know, we have some conflicts in certain parts of the world, and all the world and all the societies are somehow affected from all these conflicts or the wars or the problems. So we, in our university, are trying to develop the current and the future leaders of our country. And of course, for the academic side, we are trying our best in order to give the training and education for our students to be an architect or an engineer or a basic scientist, whether she is mathematician or geneticist, whatever. But on the other hand, we want our students to be entrepreneur, to be a team player, to be patient, to approach any problem to solve, not to discourage himself, herself, when she come across with any problem. So we want them to be the leader of the society wherever they go after they get their training and education from our university. Starting from this year, we started to implement a leadership diploma in our university. So our alumni is going to have their academic diploma, but on the other hand, they will get a leadership diploma if they could get credits from different subtitles. And these subtitles are the leadership, sustainability, contribution to society, social responsibility projects, and all these ones, or if they have the leadership in any student club or the student activity, so they get the credits from them, and at the end of their training over here, they will get a leadership diploma as well, which will be a great addition for their CV and for their future career. On the other hand, we are quite closely working with the industry, and even in our university, we have a technopark, technology development zone, and we have around 200 R&D companies. And now hundreds of our students are working in these companies, whether part-time, volunteer, or the compulsory internship. So in many aspects, they learn from the technopark companies and also with the industry that we are collaborating together. From the other way around, we got the funding from the European Union. It's 2.9 million euros, and we spend all this money in order to train and educate our students to become entrepreneurs, to establish their own startup companies. It is not only encouragement, but also an amazing training with the mentors in order to, in order to generate our alumni, not only to be a job seeker, but also, establish their own companies and start a startup company, and in order to become an entrepreneur. And from the other way around, we also want our students to be the world citizen. This is also important in order to make this world a better place for all of us, in order to create a more peaceful world. If we know, I mean, when I say we, the people from the opposite side of the borders, if we know each other more and more, then we will become friends, and this friendship for sure will stop any war or any conflict between the countries and the societies. So that's why we want to increase the number of international professors and students in our campus. And now we have we have students and faculties from more than 50 countries. And also we have a funding from European Union, which is known as Erasmus. And with this Erasmus program, we have agreement MOUs with 107 universities from 23 European countries. And our students are going to different European universities, and for certain times they stay over there, they do internship, and they get classes from the European universities. But the magic behind this project is to make our students more open-minded and more welcome to any culture. And in our campus, we say, there is no other. There is no other.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed. Well said. There is no other. Well said, sir. Well said.
The universities and all the education institutions should look in that perspective in order to train the future leaders to make this world a better place for all of us.
No,
So-
that's beautifully expressed. Beautifully expressed to make this world a better place for all of us. And I, as I listen to you, the passion with which you speak, the dedication with which you highlight certain words, the ecosystem. I think that we all together are very much part of an ecosystem in evolution. And I
Yes.
think that ecosystem, when I think about that, you know, my own area of international relations, when we study international relations, often we turn first to Kenneth Walls, to the idea of the international system. That's one way of looking at it. Anne-Marie Slaughter would say that's the chessboard. But then we also have what we may term the distributed ecosystem, and that is the web. That is the other part that is developing. That is the part we as educators are responsible for. How do we elaborate the vocabulary of the web? And I think you, sir, in what you are explaining about your university, you are helping us to reflect on the ways we may elaborate this vocabulary of the web. And for this reason, I'd like to turn to Her Excellency, Dr. April. And as a thought leader, Dr. April, I would like to ask you, in the capacity of what you are doing in terms of service to society, nurturing future CEOs, thinking about the ways of bringing positivity in the development of entrepreneurship. How do you believe we may, as educators, as business leaders, as thought innovators, how may we contribute to this ecosystem that we are discussing at present?
Yes, thank you. Well, I will say this, my colleagues here have said a lot of really great things. So I'm going to kind of piggyback on that. And I hope that whoever, you know, for those of you who have been listening and participating, I hope you're taking notes, because this is, I don't know if you saw me, but I was like, yay, you know, because what I find is that there's a discrepancy, right? We get through the educational system, we have all these great ideas, and it's a great foundation, and it is a it's good groundwork that is laid. However, when we translate it into the corporate world or the business world, it gets lost and we forget. We start looking at the other things that need to be handled inside of a business. I love what Dr. Yusuf was talking about in teaching his students, in teaching their students, not only the the entrepreneurship, but the leadership diplomat. That's that award or certificate that they can earn. Because one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the idea of conscious consumerism leads to conscious capitalism, or vice versa, right? It's a cyclical thing, conscious capitalism and conscious consumerism. We are looking at a new generation that is more global minded, and thanks to educators and other influencers in the world who are expanding these young people's minds, they're starting to see that everything we do has an impact on the ecosystem. Everything we do, in years past, pardon my bluntness here, but I think that most of us would agree who've been around for decades in this, in the working world, that there's been a lot of talk that doesn't always match up to the doing. And we're seeing that shift. We are seeing that shift with people who are saying, no, we want the transparency, we want the authenticity, we want the honesty, we want the ethical ways of doing business to become part of our everyday culture. And so we need to keep teaching this to our young people. We need to keep teaching them to think globally, to look at, I think, as Dr. Yusuf was alluding, not just to look at being an employee, but being an employer, being a producer of jobs, being someone who helps others rise to the top, and creating cultures within those startups, within those businesses, small businesses, because small businesses make up a huge portion of the world today. And I firmly believe that it's the lifeblood. So, I will say that when we can start to train, small business owners to think globally, to think like producers of jobs, think about creating a culture that perpetuates conscious capitalism and takes into consideration conscious consumerism, we start to create that ecosystem. And then, as Dr. Lisa was saying, that's what also generates that reciprocity, right? We're not only lifting ourselves, we're lifting others as we go. We're lifting others along with us. I work with an organization called 10 by 3. And one of the things that we do is we continue to lift women out of poverty by paying them prosperity wages, by teaching them to be entrepreneurs. And in fact, I will tell you this, that we work with women who do not have opportunities. It gets me every time, right? The beauty of this work, right? And we work with women who tell us that for the first time in their lives, not only are they earning money, not only are they contributing to the family, but it's the first time they've ever been even asked to sign their own name to something. It's the first time they've been regarded as contributors to society. And then what do? When they create enterprises, when they become business owners, they hire family members, they hire villagers, they hire other people in surrounding communities. And then what do? They don't stop there. Then they start to look around them and say, what else needs to be done in our community? What do we need? That's when we start building schools and taking schools from mud huts that are falling down around the children into brick buildings. And how do we do that? We create partnerships with corporations who say, we're not just going to talk about conscious capitalism, we're going to do something about it. And so these women raise the awareness and they contribute some of their money and they contribute their efforts and they partner with corporations that we work with globally, and we start changing the world. I always say that if you want to change the face of the nation and change economic status of women. Yeah. And so the other side of that is, if we want to work on these sustainable goals of gender parity, gender equality, if we want to diminish violence against women, if we want to eradicate poverty, if we want to change the way things are and create these partnerships, we've also got to look at our male allies.
Yes.
It's very important to develop female leaders, but we have to have men in the conversation who are saying, yes, we're in. We're here standing side by side. We'll help lift you, and then we'll help you lift others along the way. So I think that when we look at it from all sides of the equation, starting with the academic level and helping these young people to start thinking of, wow, here's what the future can look like. Here's what the future looks like when we become contributors to society, when we become the conscious capitalists, when we raise the consciousness of consumers to say, wow, that's the kind of business I want to do business with as I'm a consumer. That's the place where I want to work. That's the kind of business that I want to have. And then we inspire the next generation, and we inspire others around us to do the same thing. So I do think it's a partnership. And I love what Brighton and Dr. Youssef and Dr. Lisa have said. We need that reciprocity. We need that interdependence among the sustainable goals, interdependence between university and other social organizations like 10 by 3 and corporations. We need to keep encouraging that and do the doing, right? A lot of brilliant ideas come up. We also need to be doing and then tracking those things to make sure that we're actually making the impact that we promised to make.
No, absolutely. I mean, as I listen to you, thank you so much for emphasizing that last point, because to me as an educator, what that suggests is kinesthetic learning. Yes. We learn in audio ways, we learn in visual ways, and we learn by doing. And so much of curriculum development, especially as we think about now this brick, you're underlining the creation through, the lifting up of these small areas of learning in the physical sense. But we also have then the corresponding click where we want to link together in partnership these different, if I may use the term, these different nodes of learning so that we are all lifted up together. And that kinesthetic element, I think, is so critical. And
Yes.
each of you has emphasized that in a different way, in terms of the reciprocity, in terms of thinking about the leadership and the entrepreneurship and the diplomacy. What I am reminded of as you speak, in Lead Impact, the entity that I've founded, we work with 3 areas. We work with East Jerusalem, with Northeast Syria, and with the Afghan diaspora. And in Northeast Syria, it's actually poverty which prevents these women from having access to quality learning.
Yes.
And we have started with 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And we have introduced them to certain skills and to certain educators and initiatives. And then we get their feedback. And through their feedback, we are constantly learning and continuing to improve the way in which we present the content that we develop. This is critical. It's absolutely critical to go from the ground and to take that strong foundation and to build different rooms in the house. And I think what you're saying, Your Excellency, is so central to the mission that we have today as thought leaders, as business people, as educators, as architects. I mean, as an educator in international relations, I purposefully bring in architects because I think their attention to design, their experience in urbanism and regenerative urbanism is critical in terms of thinking about how we create the classrooms of the future. And I believe that, as I think back, and here Brighton might be able to add to this, or perhaps any one of you, I think back to the Global Compact and this idea of, the UN bringing in business and really developing sustainable partnerships with business leaders. I think this is so critical. And Brighton, perhaps, given what Her Excellency has explained, perhaps you could give us some sense, Brighton, of how you think bringing business and the private sector in to the educational endeavor, how that helps to realize some of the aspirations of the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think that's the engine. We need that engine, that entrepreneurial engine. I mean, yes, as academics, it's about the literature. It's about how you ground yourself in the literature. But then you also have to be thinking about how do you bring in that entrepreneurial spirit? How do you create an esprit de corps? Perhaps, Brighton, you could give us some sense of your thoughts, please.
Thank you so much. That's a very good aspect and question. And I want to actually confer what Dr. Coleman highlighted with respect to developing skills and developing competencies. I think I must say higher education and the universities are the places where all these competencies are developed, not only for universities themselves, but also for the private sector, for institutions that are the means of production. And I think the foundation begins with empowering this generation of young people. And I'm speaking to young people because I work with a lot of young people, but generally empowering the current generation and the next generation with specific 21st century competencies of critical thinking, analytical thinking, empathy, and other skills that can help them become purposeful leaders. I think the private sector and corporations equally play a key role in ensuring that they provide the needed platform for apprenticeship, for example, for students, for learners, but also that there is synchronicity between corporations and institutions where training is done, in this case, universities. If universities are providing the skills and the trainings, they should be that strong match with what the corporation needs, what corporates needs, what institutions need, what the private sector needs in terms of the specific skills of this decade. And I think the private sector also plays a very critical role in terms of having purpose-driven businesses and institutions. You discover that when we speak about things like decarbonization, the private sector comes in, because if we have to think about developing and not doing the very things that led us where we are now, like what happened during the Industrial Revolution, when we bent all the fossil fuels and we ended up raising average global temperatures, then we need to revolutionize how business is done. That's why I would borrow from the work of Dr. Rebecca Anderson from the Harvard Business School, who's been advocating strongly about purpose-driven leadership in businesses. And in her book, she emphasizes quite strongly about reimagining capitalism on a world on fire. The planet is burning. We've seen that so many young people, especially in emerging economies, are being affected by storms, by heat waves, agriculture productivity is being affected. And that's where corporations and higher education should meet. That's the intersection where we should start thinking about what type of skills can we start giving the next generation of young leaders? What type of problems are being faced globally, and how can higher education as well as corporations come together to be able to establish more sustainable solutions to respond to some of the greatest challenges? It might also mean investing in Internet of Things, blockchain, software development, or any other skills that can allow us to promote inclusion, but also access to the right skills and competencies. Lastly, I want to emphasize that access to quality opportunities and quality skills should not just be a luxury of the few. And I'm speaking this from experience. I was in my home country, Zambia, not so long ago, and I see the mismatch that exists in terms of the skills of young people in higher learning institutions and the skills in specific universities when I come to North America. And I don't think that should be the case. If we want to leave nobody behind, we need to make sure that opportunities are distributed evenly with people of color and people in developing and emerging economies. Thank you.
No, absolutely, and I'm so pleased to hear you emphasize this, because it brings up a question directly related to what you've emphasized about leaving no one behind and inclusion for Dr. Coleman. And this relates really to, I think, the next iteration of the internet, what has been called metaverse, M-City. And, you know, NYU has developed since I suppose now 20 years, these different campuses around the world. And I think that it's incumbent on us as educators looking ahead to think about, well, what about that alternative world? What about M-City? Is this possibly a space that can open up areas of inclusion? How should we perhaps be thinking as educators of approaching this space, which is largely, I think it's fair to say, largely to this point, occupied by business people? And certainly we recognize that there are billions to be made in the metaverse, in the business area. What about the education area, Dr. Coleman? Do you have thoughts about best practices, ways in which a global network university might position itself in the metaverse? And what might this mean for opening up higher education to more and more people around the world who might not have opportunities otherwise? I mean, if we're going to convince people to journey into the metaverse, shouldn't we give them a reason why they should be doing so? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you again for this very enriching conversation. And again, it's just a pleasure to be here with my other panelists. And I also wanted to just piggyback quickly on some of the things that some other people have said, and particularly this idea of architecture, design thinking, and empathy. I think that I work a lot with architects actually, and think a lot about design thinking and how we begin projects. And to go back to what Brighton was talking about, this idea of empathy. And when we think about design thinking, and the reason I'm bringing this up is a lot of corporations, leaders are starting to use this. If we think about some of the greatest leaders during COVID, Jacinda Ardern, for instance, it's in New Zealand, right? What did she do? Even prior to COVID, right, with the gun crisis, she used empathy, a model of design thinking to lean in, to understand something that is different than perhaps her own leadership, but to expand her leadership. So this goes back back to that work, and thank you for bringing up Rebecca Anderson. I do also want to say, I think corporations and leaders I used to work at Harvard for a very long time, and we use a lot of the research of faculty, researchers, et cetera, but then corporations don't actually follow the advice. Right? So they use our research, they employ it, but they don't actually use the work of someone like Rebecca Anderson. Instead, they go to other work. So I think also we need to think about how do we curate that work in our partnerships with corporations, to go back to what Dr. April was saying, so that the right research, if we're thinking about that movement around conscious capitalism, a different kind of innovation ecosystem, then we also have to think about that curation of research in a different kind of way. And this actually leads then to this idea of the metaverse, because I think you're exactly right, that the metaverse right now is held by a lot of businesses, startups, et cetera, right, sort of in that space of technology. And I think there are a couple of things that we need to break up there. It can't just be a technology space. And this goes back to what Brighton and others have said. It has to be an art space. It has to be a creative space. You have to bring in multiple disciplines into this idea of metaverse, which is not happening at the level that I think we need to, if we're going to think about inclusion in the way that you're talking about it, right? And then the second thing, we know, and we know this from the work of people like Iris Bonet and others, algorithms, all of these things, they're great. They're great. And then if they're built right, the bad input leads to bad output. I started in computer science. That's how I started. So I understand everything about hardware, software, all of those things. If you put bad things in, then that's what you get. And so whether it's the industrial revolution or the information revolution, we have to think about what we mean by revolution and what those inputs are going to look like. And so in this idea of the metaverse, I think the inputs matter very much. So it's also not just corporate inputs. I also think that it's a field that's really also dominated, right, by the West right now, by particular people in the West. And so that's also a problem. Right. And so to go back to what Brighton was even talking about, when I talked about those kids in Eritrea, right, the reason I talked about them was because that's about breaking up this model of education, which only happens in a classroom, which only happens, right, sometimes where you have a professor who's teaching, right? We love to profess, but do we love to learn? Is my question always. And so, right, so how do we bring those learnings back in? And so that idea of learning cross-generationally, I think, is very important. And that speaks to that future that Dr. April and Brighton were talking about. Because if we're going to think about the future of work, the future, the emerging populations, and really delve into that, we need co-creation, processes that actually where we're building together. And I say this all the time, if you don't have an 8-year-old mentor, your mentor, if you're over 50 and you don't have a mentor who's 10, you have a problem. You have a problem right now because you don't know what's going on. You actually don't. And you can't ask your kid because your kid's going to tell you what they want you to hear. You have to have somebody outside your family, right? So you have to expand that idea of mentor relationships, learning, et cetera. And that's where I think then we can break up this idea of metaverse, really and break it up and include the right pieces, right, that are global, that is in Zimbabwe, and also, right, St. Louis, right? And so really thinking about those connections. Lastly, what I'll say about this, the augmented reality, because I do want to speak just a little bit about sort of, avatars, et cetera, sort of creating new identities. I think this is great, but what the research suggests is that we still have bias even as we create these new identities, the bias still exists. And so I think that that's the other piece, if we're thinking about the metaverse and particularly the advance of these technologies, how do we think about those technologies that break the bias, right? If we think about, right, where we are. And so
absolutely. And I think there are some organizations, Dr. Coleman, that are thinking about unconscious bias, are thinking about that in terms of the metaverse, because as you correctly underline, it's limited at this point to a certain perspective, to a certain set of inputs that are indeed Western. And we need to deconstruct, so to speak. We need to open
And let me just say this, because it could reimagine colonialism and a neo-colonialism in a virtual world, and that is not what we want. Thank
Correct.
you very much.
No, absolutely, absolutely. That is not what we want. And you know, I think what you emphasize about co-creation, I smile because the architects I work with, they're always using co-creation, co-design, and it is critical. And I think it's perhaps the way to break up. So in other words, if you're co-designing with persons from many continents, have many experiences and many perspectives, then what you put in, I mean, to use your, I agree with you, what you put in is what you get out. What you put in is going to lead to something that is richer, that is holistic, that is fuller. And I think in learning, and I appreciate that, do we want to learn? Yes, indeed. We want to profess, but do we want to learn? You know, I remember Maxine Green at Teachers College, Columbia was a mentor to me many years ago. And she always said, it's the quality of the questions. Maxine was not so much interested in the answers. She wanted to hear the questions. Yes. And the questions you ask indeed lead you to imagine possibilities. And I think in the future that's so critical. I'm seeing Angelica here. Angelica, are you trying to remind us of certain things, dear? Because I'm seeing you there.
I know. I just wanted to join to say that this has been such a raw and such a thought-provoking discussion that I know our viewers today are really excited. But I just wanted to remind everyone that there is a chat box that you can submit the question that is dedicated to everyone on this panel, or someone in particular that you would like the question to be addressed to. So do not hesitate to do this. Thank you.
Please.
Dr. Paulette, if I may,
my eyes on that. Yes, please.
You really hit the nail on the head with something. And again, I'll also toss this back to Dr. Youssef, because when we're talking about you said something really critical, the quality of the questions. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of leadership that we need to help our young people develop. A leadership of questioning, not a leadership of dictating or professing or telling, because that's the old model, right?
Yes.
And we underestimate the importance and the significance of training them to be independent thinkers, but also really great. What's the word I'm looking for? Asking great questions, right? I'm thinking in Italian, my friend, so I couldn't think in English. You know, yeah, right. You and I will understand, but the rest of them will go, what? So, you know, but a great asker of questions, to say it another way, because, you know, that's the culture we want to cultivate inside of companies. That's the kind of entrepreneurship we want to cultivate, to ask those questions about what is needed for the company. Because look, I'm capitalist minded, right? We want profitability and we want sustainability for the company and for the people that work in it. Because if you don't have that, then you're not helping the people that you hire on, right? But also to look at how are we contributing to the world at large, and constantly asking that and opening those lines of communication where dialogue is welcome. I work with companies where still to this day, leaders in middle to upper management are afraid to ask a question that challenges the higher leadership for fear of losing their position,
yes,
losing opportunities, being outcast. And that just doesn't work anymore. That model doesn't work. And it still exists. It exists in government, it exists in corporate worlds. We've got to become better askers of questions and willing to hear the answers, from a diverse range of people, whether it's global or local. And so I think it's critical to bring that into our leadership training.
What you're saying reminds me very much of a book I read by the former NFL quarterback, Fran Tarkington, who himself is a very successful entrepreneur. And one of the things that he emphasized is, you know, we're going to make mistakes. Make your mistakes, make them quickly, learn from them, and move on. And I think that, you know, this is the kind of thinking, because, you know, a quarterback is like a CEO. And I'm a big football fan. I'm a big Miami Dolphins fan when Shula used to coach. Perfect season and everything. And the thing is that, you know, you look at a quarterback and you look at the plays he has to call. And a lot of it is about, can he call those plays himself, or does he have to wait from the top? And I think this is is it top down, or is it something where you're going to empower that CEO to listen to those who work with him? And then the plays will be called, but they'll be called at all different levels. And it's where the influence is most successful that you're going to allow that company to thrive. And I think that is a completely different mindset. And I think you're absolutely right about that. Absolutely.
And being
100%.
willing to listen and hear what's being said
Yeah.
just naturally develops your empathetic level.
Yeah,
It naturally
absolutely.
raises your
That's right.
empathy. You
have to
can't
put
not. When you're
yourself
looking
in
at
the shoes
humans
of
in
the
the
other.
face,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it leads to all of the things that we're talking about. Mhm.
I think that
we need a thing called the Ministry of Mistakes and Resilience.
there you are. Absolutely, there you are. No, absolutely, that's right on. That's right on. And the resilience comes from that openness to learn from the mistakes. And again, it's reciprocal, because you're going to make mistakes, but then you're also going to learn, and out of that's going to come something better and something stronger. But the strength comes from the willingness to accept that you have to improve, and it's a constant assessment and reassessment. And that I think every institution of higher learning could benefit from that, because we are truly in a transformational time now with COVID. The educational landscape is changing, and we so much have to learn from COVID, from the pandemic, from what was not done, and from what we could do looking ahead. And here, Dr. Youssef, I'd like to come back to you, because you've emphasized so much what your university is doing in terms of leadership, intergenerational leadership that is connected to the local areas, and also, the principle that John has emphasized in Standing for Reason, that the university has always operated beyond sovereignty. And I think, Dr. Youssef, when I think of what you are saying, this resonates with me, because the university is in a singular position, really, to be a connector. And we are in a networked world. And yet COVID has interrupted the networks. So how do we respond? And Dr. Youssef, maybe you could give us some examples, further examples of leadership endeavors, leadership initiatives that your university is taking, again, with this idea of world citizenship firmly tied to the learning at the local level, the leadership learning, the entrepreneurship learning, and the empathy. Critical. Empathy is so critical. There is no other, and yet we must place ourselves in the shoes of those with whom we wish to co-design. And that's critical. If I want to co-design with someone, how can we best do that? Dr. Youssef, please, I turn to you.
Thank you. So first, let me please add something regarding with the entrepreneurship, and then I will come to, let's say, the new era of COVID-19. So entrepreneurship is something regarding with the human resources and with the ideas. And I think human and idea, they both can be called as the seed. And the quality of the seed is important, right? Mm-hmm. But there are some other parameters more important than the seeds, or as important as the seeds, like soil, like climate, yes, and like the farmer, right? So high quality seed can just be disposed within the inappropriate soil or bad climate or the bad farmer. So the students, the human resources, and the ideas are coming to our university, and we are doing our best in order to provide an amazing ecosystem, a climate, and of course, amazing mentors and professors in order to develop these young and high potential students into the leaders. And we want to convert ideas into the products, then markets, then international companies as well. And this is true for any country or any university. So we need to optimize our ecosystem, climate, and of course we need to have strong academicians, the trainers, the mentors, and the leadership is important over here as well. So leadership, as Dr. April mentioned, It is not going to be like dictatorship style of the leadership. It should be, without the freedom, you cannot have innovative and entrepreneurial society. So it should be a free environment for anyone to share his or her ideas, to think in a way and cross the borders actually, and leave their comfort zone. I mean, the people should go beyond the comfort zone as well. And we need to provide a free ecosystem and justice for the ideas, for the students, and of course for the humankind, for the young generations. And regarding with the COVID-19 and this new era, let's say, I think that starting from 2019 December, when the pandemic started in Wuhan, China, all these 17 sustainable development goals were just left behind. Because starting from that day, we started to discuss about sustainability of Homo sapiens. Just because of this COVID-19. Because at the beginning, when someone get infected from the COVID-19, we were reacting like she had a brain cancer or very bad cancer that he's gonna die in a very short time. But of course, we thank scientists and the science, because first we understand how to diagnose, and then we found the vaccine, and then we could treat the COVID-19 patients very well. And right now it is just a regular, like a flu or something like this. So starting from COVID-19, all the sustainable development goals were left on one side, but the sustainability of Homo sapiens, humankind, it was the main topic, was the most important issue on the table. Because when there is no Homo sapiens, you don't care about poverty, you don't care about education, climate, or whatever.
Indeed, and it showed also, if I may say so, the fragility of our web.
Yeah.
And the fragility of our interconnectedness, and really the shall we say challenge of humankind to respond in specific ways now, bringing health first and foremost, health of the planet, health of the person, health of the community, health of the ecosystem into our conversations. And I see Angelica there, who would like to say a few words. It remains for me to thank each and every one of you for this beautiful, beautiful conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to each one of you. Such brilliant thinking, one is truly overwhelmed, and at the same time, it gives one hope to serve with purpose and with passion. So thank you all. Angelica, I turn it back to you, dear. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khaled, for leading this discussion. Professor Yusuf, Professor Khaled, Dr. April, Brighton, Dr. Lisa, this has been a really astonishing, very thought-provoking, insightful, and just brilliant example of how collaboration between brilliant minds creates exceptional insights for everyone who is watching us right now. And today's topic was exceptionally important because, as Professor Yusuf said, and as many speakers said before, it's vital for every institution across the globe to commit to principles of sustainability. And one thing that I just wanted to emphasize that is absolutely amazing here is that via communication, we create collaboration. So through communication today, I'm really honored that WEARS Conference has given an opportunity for everyone to communicate their ideas, passions, and showcase how they help sustain a change and help create a better, more powerful, more sustainable, more equal world. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contribution to your societies, to your communities, to your institutions. And I believe that everyone who is watching us today is taking notes and learning so much from your example. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, night.
Enjoy.
Bye. Bye.
Bye now. Bye-bye.